The fastest growing podcasts are not necessarily growing on audio only, but video first.
The intersection of video, AI, SaaS makes this an incredibly exciting time.
These sorts of functions are like butter. They make everything better.
We've seen things like VO3 just completely change the game.
Insights into the innovations and revolutions of the marketing world. Welcome to the Marketing Scientists Podcast.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Marketing Scientists. Today, we have a special episode, one with an existing Paramount customer, Veed.io, and their CMO, Leila, and their VP of Growth, Roberto. We're going to talk all about how they are dealing with a very competitive landscape, AI, video, SaaS. That's what Veed does, so let's get into it and find out. Leila, Roberto, thank you for joining me. I am super excited about this conversation, and we were talking about this right before we started recording. The intersection of video, AI, SaaS makes this an incredibly exciting time for you all, and I'm super excited to sort of dive into how you all are thinking about this and also grappling with all the change at Veed.io. So starting off, I want to dive into the conversation we were just having, Leila. So you mentioned that you all just changed the org structure a little bit within the marketing and the growth plan. Let's talk about that. So tell me a little bit about sort of how it was structured before. What is the new structure that you're moving to, and what led to that change?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having us. Essentially, Roberto was reporting into me as our growth marketing senior director, with our acquisition function, SEO, integrations, like a bunch of stuff sitting under him, and paid ads as well, and CRM. Actually, we added that to your plate at some point or another, and that was working really well. Like, we worked really well together. You know, the integration across marketing functions was very good, but we also have, as many businesses do, a great product growth team, so an activation team and a monetization team living under product. And our approach at Veed is generally like, we don't change org structures just to put like neat bows around things. We make adjustments when we can see that there are inefficiencies, or like we're duplicating work, or teams are kind of running into each other. And that was, Roberto can chime in here, but we could certainly see that sometimes, and we work really quickly with fast executors. We were executing experiments that didn't have full consideration from acquisition right through to monetization, for example. And, or we found teams were slightly duplicating work, which obviously with lean teams is not something we want to do. And so we kind of took the decision to put all of those functions, acquisition, activation, and monetization together into a growth org, and elevate that actually to the exec level, directly reporting into our CEO. Growth is everything to us. It's part of every single conversation. And so under Roberto's leadership, we've gone from strength to strength, and we're excited about now his expanded remit and what that might look like. But I'll kick it to Roberto. He can also share a bit more perspective, maybe.
Yeah, I think the main rationale, Pranav, and again, thank you for having us, is there's a lot of opportunities when you connect the funnel like end to end, right? And maybe this might be obvious for some organizations because they were already doing this in the past. In the case of Beat, this was split across like two different teams. So we're bringing that together. We think that there's like strong synergies by looking from acquisition, top of the funnel, all the way down to monetization. And that's what like is driving this change.
That's fantastic. Well, congratulations. And it seems like it's fresh news. So that's fantastic. Good timing on this podcast. Okay, so let's talk about, this idea of full funnel growth. And then Leila, when you think about sort of marketing and brand, and this is often a conversation in marketing teams, right? Brand versus sort of growth, or sometimes people talk about brand versus performance. So in this new sort of world, how do you think about sort of balancing those things and sort of the how you show up versus sort of, the growth tactics and the growth sort of mechanisms? Any initial thoughts on how that will look going forward for your teams?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing I would say is that definitely not a V. We never think about brand versus performance. I think I still hear that conversation happening a lot, and I don't understand why, because they're not two things that are distinct. They connect, they overlap, they complement each other, and so we never think about one versus the other. We are very conscious that like we're operating in a super competitive space that's only getting more and more competitive, and if we are only focused on that 5% of people in market, that's just going to create future problems for us. So we're always thinking about how do we become better known, and then how do we efficiently convert people who know us and have a need in that moment. So that's kind of our general philosophy. And I think everybody at Veed, from like Saba and Tim, our co-founders, right down through the organization, is bought into that. So there's never been this, I hear other peers having to really sell the value of brand and explain why brand's important. We come from a place where we appreciate that, and we as a business believe that. And then in practical terms, like, how do you make that happen? I wouldn't say we've got like a fixed playbook on that at this point. We're not at a stage where we say we spend this much on brand and this much on performance, but we do a couple of things. One is that we have some pretty significant channels that do a good job on both. And the main example I would give is YouTube is a really important acquisition channel for us. It drives somewhere in the region of 25% of our new MRR, as you know, because you helped us kind of figure out the numbers for that. But it also has, faces behind it, people who work at Veed who are helping tell the Veed story and have been for years and years and years. Like, they literally get recognized in the street when they go out in certain cities. So it's doing a really nice job of both. And so that's kind of my take on it. And yeah, Roberto, maybe you can share a bit more about how you think about connecting the dots between the two things.
Yeah, I think if I maybe put it in a map or in some sort of like diagram, I will say that it's a three-dimensional map, right? Like you have on one hand everything that is related to brand and perceptions, and then how do you speak to your customers? How do you address their pain points? Then on a second dimension, you have your offering, and then we basically compete in three big areas. Subtitles is one, video editing is the other one, and then everything related to AI video, from like improving your existing video to generative video to creating, social media videos at scale. And the third piece is your distribution. Like your third dimension is your distribution, which typically is being thought as channels, right? Vic has the advantage that is super strong in search, and that has been for a long time, I guess, the spearhead of growth for the company. And then on top of that, we obviously you add layers. Like we added PPC right after our SEO position, and then we start experimenting with like new channels such as OpenAI, ChatGPT, referral programs, all that sort of stuff. And each channel has like its own, I guess, a set of dynamics. So if you consider like those three dimensions, I think you have like maybe the prototype of a playbook that can give you, an idea on like where do you play, how do you win, which at the end of the day is the definition of a strategy.
Yeah, and just one thing to add to that, I forget who it was, but someone came and did a talk recently at the office, and they said that brand is, I'm going to like mess up the exact quote, but brand is the sum total of every single interaction that anyone ever has with your brand. So I think a lot of people when they say brand versus performance, they're just thinking about paid marketing or how much you're spending on a certain thing. We definitely do take a broader view that it's like every time someone steps into our office, every time we show up at an event, every conversation someone has with someone from Veed, every time we strike up an influencer partnership and, create transactions with people, partnerships with folks like yourself, like we take all of that stuff really seriously, and I think want to make sure that Veed is showing up in a meaningful way that gives us a really strong foundation for brand on top of the paid activity we're doing and the strategic stuff that Roberto was talking about.
Okay, so this is super helpful, and I fully align with how you described the role of brand and the difference between brand versus branding versus brand marketing, and people often conflate some of them. Okay, let's get into the topic of your specific category, because, oh my God, video just taken off, right? We've seen things like VO3 just completely change the game in the last, I would say, 8 weeks. I don't know if you all saw the Kalshi ad that aired for the NBA finals, but it was just like, holy shit moment for us. And, generally sort of there's also a lot of competition. There's a lot of funding, and there's a lot of sort of noise in the ecosystem. So when you think about your business strategy in this, particular time, as you're thinking about Q3 and Q4, how do you compete in this environment? Like, it is just gotta be quite, and I don't mean to be hyperbolic, but it has to be a little bit stressful for, somebody with a growth title and somebody with a marketing title in this type of an environment. So I'm curious if you can give us some thoughts on how you deal with this competitive sort of space and environment right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a quick answer, and then Roberto will chime in for sure. But I think it's not for the faint-hearted for sure. It's super competitive. Like everything's changing just as you think you get a grip on something, and there's a lot going on. But we focus on the things that we do well. So Roberto talked about SEO. I would say Veed is absolutely world class at that, and that predates me joining. It predates Roberto, and neither of us have broken it. So kudos to the team. And when you've got that distribution, there's an incredible amount of value that comes with that. So we are building things that people search for, and we're able to connect with them in like really smart ways. The other one is speed of execution. Veed executes very, very quickly, and that's like a strong part of the DNA. And you mentioned VO. We were one of the first to take VO, integrate it, and ship it, and bring it to our millions of customers, because everyone was seeing all these VO videos, right? Everyone was seeing Big Yowie and whatever the thing that was exploding on X or whatever platform. But then if you actually took a step back and said, okay, how do I access it as like a normal person who's just interested in video creation? You're not dev, you're not, whatever. It's like 6 steps and quite a bit of money. And so in line with our mission of making video editing and video creation accessible to anyone, bringing those new technologies to people within our interfaces is like something we do really well, have done in the past, and will continue to do into the future. And then I think the third thing is brand. When you look at a lot of tech businesses, some of the technology in the AI space is inevitably just becoming more and more commoditized, right? Like, what's the difference between this dubbing and that dubbing? What's the difference between translation here and translation there? And so people are not just looking for the best technology in a particular space, they're looking for the best interface and the best business that they want to work with. And so those are 3 areas that I think we're strong and we're very invested in. But yeah, like we do have, we work with a whole bunch of different AI partners, from OpenAI and Google Cloud to smaller, more niche providers. And we build our own proprietary AI technology on top for the things that only people who are processing a lot of video can do really, really well. So I think we're really well positioned within that space, able to act quickly, and have been investing in community and kind of brand for a long time. That was a longer answer than I anticipated.
That's a great answer. I love it. Roberto, what's your take from a tactical perspective when you're competing against other people who are bidding on the same keywords, or also taking at the same sort of SEO approach, right? SEO is very competitive, obviously, and this new emerging some people call it AEO, some people call it GEO. I mean, you all have done some interesting stuff with LLM. So I'm curious, like break that down for us.
Yeah, I think in many cases, especially in this new competitive environment, a lot of voices out there coincide that distribution is a key competitive advantage. And the fact that Veed has such a strong, not only a stronghold on SEO, but the ability to expand that distribution to other channels like relatively fast, I will say that that's definitely given us an advantage over other players. Now, at the same time, we are providing something that is not necessarily that obvious, but I think once customers realize, it becomes a strong incentive, and it's this sort of a one-stop shop for everything that is related to video, right? Like, some people might come out of like the fact that they want subtitles on their videos, and they have seen that Veed's subtitles are great. But they come and then they discover that maybe they can add an avatar to their video. They can create generative AI and then put it as V-roll on their video. Maybe it's a long form video and they can create clips out of that as part of one single solution. Reality is that the video space is really fragmented. The workflows are like also fragmented. You might start on a mobile device and then eventually move it to desktop. But at the end of the day, you want to have a great video and you don't want to spend a lot of time like creating that video. And that's precisely where we play. We provide that ease of use and that one place for all those needs in our platform.
Very cool. Okay. Switching gears a little bit. So you all, obviously, Roberto, you worked very closely with Leila for the last couple of years, and now you're a peer. So I'm going to ask a spicy question and give me your honest take. Has there been a time when you all have disagreed on something? And how do you tackle disagreements in a high-functioning marketing organization?
I mean, we must have done, sure. But I think I'm struggling to think of a specific example. We've had a very strong disagreement, Roberto. You might have to help me out here.
Yes, I think maybe the other side of it is that we complement each other quite well, and that helps addressing some of these points. But I can think, for example, of maybe some of our DAOs in terms of the brand campaign that was run in Q1, Q2, and how to think about like that media mix. And yeah, it's just like maybe coming from like different parts of the equation. At the end of the day, I think it has worked quite well to meet in the middle most of the times.
Yeah, I think, that's like really not spicy. I'm sorry that we couldn't really because ultimately we've disagreed on, we might not have shared the exact same opinion on lots of things, but because there's a healthy mutual respect and also like very different skills and styles, like I know what I'm good at and I know what Roberto is great at. And so it's never tense disagreements is what I would say. There are plenty of people I have disagreements with, just not with Roberto.
Well, that's a fascinating answer, right? Because that also says something about how you design a well-functioning organization, is when you have complementary skill sets and you have autonomy on, hey, this is something that I'm sort of world-class at, and this is something that you're world-class at, and you structure the organization in a way that works really well. So that's kudos to the company for building that type of an environment. Okay, so you mentioned, Roberto, the brand campaign, and let's talk about that. And we don't have to go into like the nitty-gritty details, and obviously I know a ton about that given we were working together on a bunch of this. But talk to me about sort of how that campaign was started. What was the inspiration behind it? What have you all learned from it, and what are you doing differently going forward as a result of kind of the lessons from that brand campaign? Like I'd love to kind of break it down for our audience. It's always fun to talk about sort of the integrated marketing, big brand moments, but also looking at them from a tactical sort of metrics lens as well.
Yeah, maybe I can start with like the how it started, and then I'll pass it back to Leila. It all started with a business need. So when we were wrapping up 2024, we saw several indications that it kind of like evolve into the brand campaign. The first one is that customers growing out of brand inputs, like let's say is direct traffic, and we know that direct is never direct, but like it comes out like maybe word of mouth or previous advertising input, or just being present out there. Yeah, we saw that those cohorts of users typically saw better retention, better unit economics, larger usage, that sort of thing. And then we started like thinking, okay, so if we wanted to increase that, I guess, cohort of users, how should we do it? And we started like laying out a series of hypotheses. Some of those hypotheses came from previous experiences. In my case, like running maybe similar efforts in previous companies. In other cases, initial data that we had out of like a particular effort, such as like influencer marketing, for example, which is quite relevant for a bit. And then we started like putting a plan together, like out of those hypotheses, how do we act on it? Where should we focus on? What should be the right messaging, the right creative execution? And then slowly, well, actually, no, quite fast, because we had this target Q1 to get this done. We put a plan together and act on it. And then with that being said, I later pass it to you.
Yeah, so we kind of had that foundation and infrastructure and desire, and then we set about like designing a campaign in a way. We didn't have endless funds. We didn't want to try and go too broad before we'd actually kind of run a bit of a test. And so then we set about designing the practicalities of what might this look like and what markets we want to do it in. So we zeroed in on an important geo for us, the US. We zeroed in on where we had where we thought we should have higher concentration based on like the makeup of the city and things like that. And so this kind of brought us to New York. There's a bunch of data that went into even making that decision. And we really wanted to be able to look at like the impact of running this versus, other places where we were as business as usual. And then we set about kind of writing a brief and just deciding, we've got quite a broad audience base ranging from like individual creators to SMBs right through to enterprises, and figuring out where we wanted to focus this and how we could create something that could potentially talk to all of them without losing the value it would have for a particular audience. And, briefing the creative team. And what was really interesting was Roberto there's a few pieces that kind of came together in some way, not, maybe in some parts by luck, but Roberto had this idea from very early on that he kind of said, I think we should do out of home. He said, the way New York is concentrated and the way the transport system works there, it's like one of the few cities, a bit like London, where you can actually target people who are going about their business and going to work. And I think we can get quite a lot of cut through, and it's like an unexpected way for us to show up. And by the way, generally, I don't advocate for like picking channels and media before you even have a creative idea. But in this instance, we kind of had this notion like built into the campaign thinking from the beginning. We had pricing, we had a partner to work with on this. And so then we set about kind of designing a campaign, and we did a lot of digital testing in phase one. Like the creative team went away, they came up with a few different paths that were building on insights and data that we already had. We tested things like mentioning other AI partners, not mentioning them, different lines, you know, headings and things like that, and kind of narrowed in on this like creative approach, which was just showcasing people who use Veed. Like, and that's very, I think, a core principle of our brand in general is like spotlighting the people who are using the tool and addressing like a very simple truth that people think video editing is hard, and it was this like strike through. So we kind of got to this campaign idea and then went back and presented it to Saba. The creative team had done a lot of work. As I said, lots of digital testing, paid ads, loads of data. We were kind of moving down a path. And we actually had like stock images of people in the end, because we were like, it's too hard to find customers. It's going to take too long.
Right.
Like, print deadline coming up, all the stuff. And Saba was like, this is great. I love it. But I want real people. And we were like, right. And he was right. He often is when he pushes us things like this. And then we kind of thought, well, actually, we've got a really strong creator campaign already planned for this with creators in New York. What if we got the creators who are all content creators as in their own right? What if we get them to be on it? And so that's kind of what we did. They were super hyped to get involved. You know, I think these content creators had never been asked to be on a billboard before. And you just got this incredible kind of multiplier impact of like them going to the posters, taking pictures, creating more content that they distributed, and like everyone who they knew in the city, all their followers, because they've obviously got big communities, taking pictures, sending it, tagging Veed, and on and on and on and on. So that was kind of the process that we went through. We did it all in-house.
Wow.
And only 5% of the total spend was non-working dollars, which I also think is quite interesting.
That's amazing. Okay, that's a great breakdown. I love the idea of featuring the creators themselves, because that has such a great sort of knock-on effect. Coming out of that, right, were there key lessons that you're taking from that campaign, from that moment, into how you think about sort of growth campaigns or brand campaigns going into second half and even 2026? What are the key lessons for you all?
I can tell you mine. One was like bridging traditional and offline media with like digital and social, and creating things that just continue to make a content flywheel in some way is like a really smart thing to do in general. Don't write off like old school media and traditional media is another thing. I think people were a bit surprised that we took like over 2,000 billboards in New York City. I think, you know, our founder at one point was like, we're doing what? Not only can you make it really effective, but also there's a certain cachet that is associated with like being on billboards, and it's like you're a real business. And so I think that was another for us, is that still exists, you know, in the world. We had much evidence of that. And the third one was that we needed like more organized project management infrastructure within Veed to enable us to execute these things very, very well. So we've definitely made some changes on that front too.
I want to put a pin in that one and come back to that, because I think that's an important one for many teams. But Roberto, anything from your end that you want to add on that?
Yeah, I would say that this was the first time also that we expanded to a more, I guess, wide marketing mix. And then we wanted to understand the potential implications of that for the future. And this is also where like part of Mark came in and, you know, helped us figure things out, because in a lot of cases, some of these inputs don't have a connection directly with our attribution method, right? But the main takeaway is some of those learnings, right? Like, what are the channels that have a potential for the future? Where should we invest more in the next campaigns? And, you know, how do we continue building a experimentation framework that help us validate some of these assumptions?
That's fantastic. Okay, so coming back to, you know, that project management infrastructure, I'm really curious about this, Leila, because I don't think I've seen any company, and, you know, I've a marketing background myself, ran marketing teams and growth teams and product marketing and customer marketing. And at every company, it was a challenge to get everybody on the same page in terms of the project management of things. And I don't know if this is just like, a problem that's inherent to marketing, but there's so many different moving parts, right? You've got different functions, you've got different teams, you've got different ways of doing work, right? Whether you're in Veed or Canva or Figma or, Notion or Google Slides or a spreadsheet or Slack, it's like mind numbing to me. And how do you bring it all together? So is that consistent with how you all do things, or am I the only one who feels that whole project management piece for marketing is extremely gnarly and unsatisfactory?
Yeah, I mean, look, the truth is we didn't have project managers, so you were distributing the responsibility as well across like different people. And then when you do that, of course, you get like different approaches. Some people who love everything in a spreadsheet, some people who like we've done a reasonably good job of like nudging the team towards consistent ways of doing things and some processes. But actually in this instance, it became clear that having somebody driving agendas forward, keeping everybody accountable, and for want of a better phrase, kind of cracking the whip in some instances was much, much needed. And I think one problem I've seen, I've worked in much bigger companies who do have project managers and everything's like over-engineered and project managed to within an inch of its life. I think earlier stage companies have the opposite problem, that as soon as you sort of put on the table, let's hire something that is an efficiency hire and doesn't have a very clear output, people go, oh, well, we want to stay lean and like, let's put somebody in like growth because we can tie that to something. And you kind of, got to go on a bit of a journey of explaining that these sorts of functions are like butter. They make everything better, and you can't measure one single output, but like everything we do now is 20% better just from having people who are thinking about these problems. And the other thing I'll say on it is we're using a lot of AI now to automate a lot of processes. So we saw lots of things that were repetitive and like could be automated through AI. And we've got like one very smart person on the team who happens to be pretty technical, who naturally was leaning in here, and we kind of have officiated that and made that like a function within the team. So we're, building custom GPTs and experimenting with agents and doing a lot there.
Oh, that's fantastic. We just opened a role on our team. We're calling this a GTM engineer. That's all the rage in the B2B world. But what's the scope and the mandate for that one person? Like, and what's their title? Like, what is it official? Like, tell me more. Yeah.
I mean, you're literally getting all the hot off the press stuff. We made it official today. So,
wow. Okay.
So she was working in our CRM team and had a pretty broad set of skills in that she had been a designer in the past and also was technical enough to be dangerous. So she could do a bit of coding and things like that. So she was managing landing pages, CRM assets, like design tasks, a bunch of stuff. And she had been very proactive. Like, we've had a big drive on AI that hasn't everybody in terms of getting the team more fluent, building into our hiring matrices and, getting the team more active. And she'd been like particularly active in this space and had like built things that were really valuable and like scaled them across the team. And also during the brand campaign, we asked her to project manage it as a bit of a test, and she was able to like really get the best out of our creative production team. Small team, if we did the whole thing in-house, if you can imagine the number of assets, I wish I could tell you how many it was, but it was a lot. She did a really great job on that. So actually the role that we've created for her is AI and creative operations manager.
Cool.
So there's a bunch of automation and there's a bit of operations in there. And, the idea is, I told her, like, the more you can automate, if you can talk yourself out of like one job, we'll move you to another kind of project. So she's right now working on an AI, I think it's custom GPT in this case, that will help us with the baseline lift of our product launches. Like, we ship stuff all the time, and it's the same group of marketers who, the product teams work in pods, but we only have like the same people shipping stuff. And so this is going to automate a bunch of stuff to enable us to like continue to ship fast and focus on the stuff that really needs marketeers overseeing it.
If I can add to that, I will say that like the perfect or the sweet spot for this kind of role is someone that understands marketing, but at the same time has like maybe the appetite or the technical background to go after like vibe coding, creating GPTs, that sort of stuff, right?
Exactly.
That's
that.
fantastic.
I think we saw very clearly, and I've talked to so many other CMOs about this, because obviously everyone is on the same journey of like, how do you build AI fluency into your organization? We sort of did a bunch of stuff in January that was like telling the team what the expectation was and what we wanted to do, trying to provide some support and structure around that. And what I could see in the last few months was like the appetite and curiosity was for sure there. Everyone was really leaning in and everyone wanted to do it. But from like watching an interesting podcast about an AI agent that somebody built that's doing X, Y, Z and thinking, yeah, I could apply that to Veed, and actually building it, there's like a gap. Like I couldn't do it personally. And so finding people who can bridge that gap, I think can be a superpower for a lot of organizations for sure.
Yeah, what I think is really challenging is this is a completely new domain and role, right? So people are like, everyone's kind of figuring out, okay, what is that combination of skill set? And Roberto, you said it nicely. You have a marketing background, but you're technical, and, combining those two things. And I think we're seeing this in other domains as well, right? You now have, product designers who are capable of shipping prototypes because of what's happening in that domain. So it's very similar that you have marketing professionals who are capable of shipping automations because they understand sort of the context, and you don't have to translate everything into a brief and then hand it over to an engineer who then has to go build it. Very cool. Okay, so I want to bring this to a close a little bit. Between the two of you, you've worked at some amazing brands, right? So Leila, you were at, if I'm not wrong, Meta, and then Snap, and then Veed, and Roberto, you spent time at OLX and Typeform and Small PDF, if I'm not wrong, and now Veed. In the last couple of decades, and where you see yourself today, if you were to advise sort of these, and having this perspective from like large companies to high growth, high scale, fast moving companies, if you were to give sort of your top one or two pieces of advice to other marketing teams who are at that similar stage and are looking to up their game, are there things that you would recommend in terms of, whether that's creative, whether that's experimentation, whether that's, all the AI stuff? Like, what is the one or two things that would not be obvious, but to you, like, are game changers for your company?
It's a great question. Roberto, you want to kick us off? Well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the landscape is changing, that's for sure. AI is redefining not only the companies, but the way we operate, or roles, job descriptions, and so on. I think we're going to continue to see progress in that, and then AI being like more and more visible in the different areas of an organization. That being said, though, I'm a strong believer on first principles. And I think that, the one thing that I would recommend for, I guess, marketing professionals is to make sure that those principles are still in place, continue to challenge whenever they need to be challenged. But yeah, breaking a problem into its pieces, and then make sure that one of those pieces really comes or boils down to understanding your customers, understanding your existing motions, and how those two things come together. It would be, I guess, like my 2 cents on discussion.
Simple answer, but I think you hit the nail on the head, is if you don't understand your customers, nothing else really can happen. So I couldn't agree more. It's a good one.
Yeah. And I think like the thing I would say, which is connected to that, and this has been true, when I was at Meta and at Snap, but technology changes super, super fast. Like the one thing we can guarantee is in a couple of years, everything's going to look very, very different again. But like humans and the human brain change very, very slowly. So like what has actually changed about like human motivations and the way we think over the past 100 years, our attention spans got a little bit shorter. That's basically it. Everything else is like exactly as it was when people were sitting around campfires. So I would say like, yes, be obsessed with the technology, and that is a tactic, but remain completely obsessed with customers and motivations and psychology, because that is the number one thing. Yeah. And I think people can lose that sometimes because we get lost in the AI and the tools and the ecosystem a little bit.
I couldn't agree more. On that point of attention spans, I've thought about this quite a lot, and a couple of examples. I'll get your reaction on this. My favorite 2 podcasts. One is the Acquired podcast. I don't know if you all have listened to that. It's like 3 hours long, or sometimes even longer. And then the other one that's more recent is this podcast called TBPN. It's very tech bro-ish. Sorry. But they do daily podcasts that are 3 hours long. I'm like, how are people listening to this? And like, I think this fascination with, short form, that's definitely true on video, But I think there are longer form on audio that's kind of doing the opposite, where we're seeing sort of longer form content do really well. And so that was just like an interesting tidbit. I lied when I said I had the last question. I want to have one more question. Apart from Veed, what is your favorite AI tool right now?
I think everyone in my team would be able to tell you. I love Granola.
All right.
Granola is like, when I think about daily, I'm not going to mention the obvious ones like ChatGPT and things that I use all the time, but Granola is like daily usage at the point of like, I'd be devastated if someone took it away from me. They launched a iOS app as well, which was the missing thing. And yeah, I use it for absolutely everything. So if you haven't tried it, big shout out for Granola. I think they're exceptional. And also building from London around the corner from us, which...
Oh, nice. Very cool.
Yeah, I was just gonna comment on your previous point because I think it's quite interesting. I agree that the long form content has a lot of space still today, and especially in spaces or examples that you mentioned, they're quite useful for like gathering insights and then try to apply them into your organization. The other side of it though is that Scott Galloway has like a really interesting point on this, and then he's basically mentioning that the fastest growing podcasts are not necessarily growing on audio only, but video first.
Right.
And then that means that the maybe most not so well thought platform for consuming podcasts now these days is YouTube.
Yep.
And that there's this convergence of like video and audio that is maybe more relevant than it used to be in the past. And I think Feed is well positioned to support if you want to go on that side. But yeah, if you're an organization, you're a company, and you want to like maybe consider another thought leadership channel, YouTube is the obvious choice, especially if you like are able to bring these two things together. The other side of it is that all these maybe if you are creating long form content like the podcast that you mentioned, you still need a distribution strategy. And that typically is in social media, and that typically is in the short form content. So also being able to recycle and repurpose those long form videos into shorter form bits, it's quite useful. And then we do that. We provide that and I'm gonna connect with my favorite, AI tool these days internally is Clips, because it allows you precisely to do that with the support of AI. And it's one of the areas of the business that is growing quite fast over the last few months. And there's a lot of people that is like, finding value in this kind of a space.
Yeah, 100%. And just to add on that, I actually wonder if like the attention span thing maybe to some degree needs reframing. I think it's just that people have so much choice. And when you have an abundance of choice, then there is a way people react. Like an executive at Meta used to talk about the days when people would run home to watch certain TV programs because like only showing the one time, and now you can watch anything anytime, and it's competing with every piece of content ever created in the world all the time. And so great content will always cut through. And I think I saw a guy from YouTube talking about this at an event recently. He was saying they're seeing a lot of growth in long form. So even though short form is a crucial part of go to market, as Roberto talked about, like I think quality will always win, whatever the platform is. So we're strong believers in that for sure. Hopefully you'll use Clips to chop this up and get some nice sound bites.
There we go.
Lost on social media. We can help.
All right. Fantastic. Well, Roberto, Leila, thank you for your candid takes. This was fantastic. Really excited to continue, getting to know you better and working together on all of these campaigns. And if for everybody who's listening, go follow Leila and Roberto. I don't know that you guys talk much on LinkedIn about stuff. I think, Leila, maybe you do. But go check out Veed.io. And you'll be working with some of the best video AI tools out there. Thank you both.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
All right, friends, there you have it. That was Leila and Roberto from Veed.io. If you haven't checked out Veed, I would give it a serious look if you are into any type of video editing. So go check them out, and also tune in again next week for another amazing episode.